Welcome. Joined by Param Singh, who is running for Mayor of Ottawa, comes from a policing background. Are you a current or former police officer at this stage?
I'm still a current police officer with the city of Ottawa. I'll be celebrating 20 years of service in September. Currently on a leave of absence without pay, so I can run during the election.
Terrific. And I saw on your website that your two priorities, the first two priorities on your website, are inclusivity and affordable housing. Now, of course,
Yes.
affordable housing is something that matters a great deal to us at Operation Come Home. That's obviously where we're focusing the bulk of our efforts with the crisis that we're facing in Ottawa right now. But I thought I'd just let you start with inclusivity. What does that mean to you, and how do you plan to bring more inclusivity to Ottawa?
It's funny you asked that. I was actually looking at that at a debate that I just did recently, and I was talking to someone and came to the realization that Ottawa is a very inclusive city, that there's a tremendous amount of respect that goes around for anyone and everyone, depending on whether you're from another country, you're from another religion, whether you're part of the 2SLGBTQIA plus community.
Yeah.
There's a lot of respect that goes around, but I think we can do much better than that. I think that, being a police officer, I've seen a lot of hate crimes happen, the trucker convoy, a lot of hate rhetoric happening. And I think we're better than that. And I think we can do much better than that, whether it's just a question of education or it's a question of just saying, minding your own business or just respecting one another a little bit more. As individuals, as human beings, I think we can all achieve that level. And I think we can and we will achieve that level. But when, that is a question of for everyone to answer, and everyone needs to do their own part in this. So we are a very inclusive city. We do respect one another. Are there areas in the city that needs improvement on? Absolutely. I think everything needs improvement. Can we do it right away? I think we need to take our time and do it at a pace that's comfortable for everyone so we can move forward and not take one step forward and two steps back. So we need to keep moving forward without going backwards. So
for sure. Now, we recently, I don't know if you know Operation Come Home very well, but I presume you're familiar with our organization.
yeah.
So we provide housing assistance, mental health help, education, and employment programs for homeless, at-risk, and street-involved youth. And we just did a survey recently, and just on the topic of inclusivity, we were very surprised to see, and normally, and we know that, LGBTQ2S plus people are overrepresented in the homeless community, and certainly among homeless youth, right? A lot of home situations are much worse for them than they are for others. And so generally speaking, we see about 20% LGBTQ2S plus in the drop-in, right? Just our regular drop-in. We did a survey of our employment program. And when it comes to finding a job, 40% of the youth who are in our employment program identify as lesbian, gay, transgender, two-spirited, you name it. There's all kinds of people in that employment program. And as you mentioned, when the convoy was here, right, there was a lot of hateful rhetoric that went around. Our youth being right downtown in the middle of that convoy, wearing, demonstrably, gay patches on their shirts or transgender flags on their backpacks, were the target of a lot of that hate. And, I'm wondering, just, as a police officer, do you think that the police response to the convoy and the ongoing response to what's happening at St. Bridget's Church is adequate?
When it comes to the convoy, I can't speak about that. There's inquiries currently in place. There's investigations currently in place. And being a police officer, I can't speak to that. I know there's been a lot of hatred is a strong word, but negative comments made towards the police or towards the inaction of certain things. All I can say is, like any organizations, we're all confined by a set of laws, and we can do only what we can do within those set confine of laws. And if we ask for resources and we get the resources, then we can get the job done. So we can only do as much as what we're given and what's within the confines of those laws and set rules that are already set in place. We cannot go above and beyond that. If we do, it's because someone's giving us the authority to do that. Now, having set aside the St. Bridget's incident, I'm not well versed in what's going on. I believe they're not paying their rent, and I know the sheriff went at the location to expel them and whatnot. Police were there to keep the peace. As a policing perspective, this is a tenant protection and landlord issue, and they have to deal with that portion of it. As if I was an elected official, could the city do more? I don't know because I'm not there yet. So that's a tricky question to answer. When it comes to the youth that were downtown, the 2SL LGBTQIA plus community that was downtown, and being the targets of some hateful rhetoric, I think that was disgusting. But the police can only do so much, because if you don't report it to the police, we don't know about it, right? So I always tell everyone, it's one thing to complain about it, and it's another thing to put it on social media. This happened to me, that happened to me. But if they don't complain and put a formal complaint in with the police service and give us the details, or give the police service the details of what happened, we can't do anything. We're not mind readers. And I say we're not mind readers. The police are not mind readers. And as much as we can go on social media, we still need a victim for a complaint in order for a complaint to proceed. So what I always suggest to people when I'm in uniform and I'm working is, if you have a complaint or you feel uncomfortable and you think that you are a target of hate crime or anything, put in that complaint. So.
Yep, for sure. I see that little off topic, but I see that there are some journalists in Ottawa who are really starting to become the targets of a lot of that hateful online threats and some pretty terrible stuff that just seems to be escalating day after day. And they have filed formal complaints with the police, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And I'm sure that's a difficult situation, and I'm sure you can't really comment on it as a police officer, but I do want people watching this to know that this is going on, and that journalists are really being targeted by very, very hateful online threats and rhetoric at the moment. And I think that's something we really have to deal with here in Ottawa before it gets worse. I think it has the potential to get much, much worse.
It can, just on the topic of social media, Twitter, I'm not a big fan of. I use it, but very scarcely. Twitter is, for me, a open book for keyboard warriors that have nothing better to do than to just put hateful rhetoric and make threats. I've received threats back with my own policing Twitter account. I've had colleagues receive threats. I've seen media spokespersons receive threats, and it's all keyboard warriors. You look at their profiles and there's almost no one following them, and they're the first ones to make hateful comments towards anyone and everyone. And I think Twitter can do a better job in clearing that mess up and cleaning it up. But yet again, Twitter is, I think, a negative source of social media. And I stand by that comment, and I barely use it. And, I will try to promote anything that's positive on Twitter. I'll always try to post something that's happy and joyful, and retweet stuff that's happy and joyful, and, positive information coming out from other sources. But there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there. So.
There certainly are, but at the same time, if I didn't have Twitter, I would see fewer videos of red pandas fighting each other, and that would be a shame. you know?
True.
So, so housing is your second pillar here. And this
Yes.
is something that, you know, obviously we want to talk about a lot. The way that I see it is that there are sort of two elements to this, right? There's the immediate crisis and what can we do in the immediate future to alleviate the strain on the system. And then the much, much longer term plan of how do we actually end homelessness? How do we follow the federal Housing First guidelines and create affordable housing for enough people in Ottawa when right now we're losing the affordable housing that exists and we're not building nearly enough affordable housing to make up for that. So let's start with the immediate situation, right? What are some of the short-term plans that you're thinking about for alleviating the immediate crisis that's going on in affordable housing?
The short-term plan, I think we need to first start off with the properties that the city or that the organization own already in regards to affordable housing, subsidized housing right now. We need to bring it back to a standard that's proper and respectful for the tenants. You know, there's a lot of properties that need to be looked after, renovated, to be brought back up to par with current standards. And I think that the city, I don't want to say neglectful, but you know, there's a lot of things going on, and sometimes you forget or you put it aside and you'll say you'll get to it eventually. You'll get to it eventually. I think we need to start getting to it now before we lose a couple of those properties and make the situation even worse. I believe there's about 12,000 people on the waiting list for subsidized housing. I don't want to see that number increasing. I want to see that number reduced. Ottawa also already has a Ottawa housing plan, the 10-year housing plan for homelessness, and I think it's from 2020 to 2030. I think what we need to start doing is recognizing and tailoring solutions that are more responsive and equitable for everyone, so that when we do find something, it's suited either for a single individual, a couple for two, a family of 3, 4, or 5. So we need to start tailoring those solutions and making sure that when we do get results at the end of the year or after 2 years or after 3 years or at the end of the program, that those results are much more fruitful than if we just stay status quo and let the program run as is. So
Yeah. Now, I think one of the issues with this is that it's going to take a lot of money up front, right? It's going to be very, very pricey up front to find that equitable solution. We're a big proponent of the scattered housing model, right? The idea that every new development has a certain amount of affordable housing units, which means you have to work with developers. You have to put money into those units in order to be able to house people in them. Developers obviously reticent. They drag their feet a little on this. They don't really want to do it, but there has to be a way to do that. And the reason that we advocate the scattered housing model is that it's all well and good to build one giant building or to repurpose one that exists downtown that's going to end up being empty or something, and put everybody in that building. But really, then you're just warehousing people who are struggling, right? You're
yeah,
not you're not giving them the full opportunity to reintegrate into society, to become, you know, productive members. And I think that the one thing that gets lost, certainly in political campaigns, I think, is that people don't really like that upfront cost. And it's hard to make the case to people, even though the numbers very much bear it out, that it saves a ton of money in the long term, right? I think it costs $64,000 a year to keep one person on the street homeless. Whereas, you know, if you're the city and you're subsidizing their rent for $2,500 a month, well, you're spending a lot less already, right?
mm-hmm.
In terms of policing costs, in terms of hospital costs, healthcare, all of this that
Yeah.
goes into it, right? So is that something that you agree with, the scattered housing model? And if so, how do you present that so that people say, okay, we're going to put $1 billion into this today, but we're going to save $3 billion in a decade?
I do agree with that scattered concept because at the beginning of my campaign, I had the I was fortunate to visit Haven House or Haven Community Center, which is through an organization that built affordable housing in the Barhaven area. Beautiful area. And even the complex, they had apartments, they had row homes and everything. They had a community center and everything, but it was in Barhaven, and you wouldn't expect that to be an affordable housing complex. And and that's what's nice about it. People who are struggling for different reasons. Doesn't make them less of a person because they're struggling. They could have had a bad day, a bad year. They could have lost someone. It could be mental health, addiction, whatever it is. They're still human beings, and we need to treat them like that. So when you put them in, like you said, in a big building and you just leave everyone in there, it's like you're just warehousing them, like you said. And that concept of warehousing people in an area, in a neighborhood, or in a corner is disrespectful to them. They're human beings. They have rights, right? And housing is a fundamental right. Um, and we have to accept that. We have to respect that. So for me, having these areas, these housings scattered all over the place, whether it's an apartment complex, whether it's row homes or anything, if it's affordable housing and it's getting someone off the streets and into an affordable home, whether it's subsidized or whatever the case may be, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think it also makes that family feel more accepted, integrated in that community, and they're going to be even more productive. And like you said before, not going to visit hospitals, maybe not going to drug addiction, better mental health. Uh, when you look at kids, they can go into sports. They can go into sports with their own peers. I lived in Montreal for 24 years. I moved in Ottawa in 2020. I lived in a two-bedroom apartment before moving here with three other siblings. My living room was my bedroom, my large sofa, and I've always lived in that. I shared a bedroom with my three other siblings, but at one point when you get older, you need your own little space. So my brother and I had the living room, and my sisters had the bedroom. So, but we never made an issue of that. We loved it. Our parents loved us, gave us food. I played hockey, they played baseball. We didn't have much, but we always made do with what we had, and we always had a smile on our face. And for me, the minute you give a family a roof over the head and you give them an opportunity to do something better for themselves and you put a smile on their face, we've succeeded. Now, what we need to do is make sure that anything we do in the future is sustainable and is for the long run, not a short-term solution. If we're going to repurpose a building downtown, because now we have a lot of buildings that are not being used, and if the federal government decides to say, hey, we have 3 buildings if you want to take it, well, do we want to convert them into affordable housing? Maybe yes, but at what cost? Is it going to cost us more to do that because we have to take the asbestos out or any other crap that's been in those buildings that have been there for such a long time? Or is it going to be in an affordable way, and then we can maybe house another 100, 150 homes, families, uh, you know, in the short run, and maybe use that as an emergency shelter eventually and take them out and put them into other permanent homes, right?
Right.
So these are all things we need to be equitable. We need to not only decide that we're going to be looking and building these affordable homes, but we need to ask the people who are on the subsidized list, what are they looking for? Where do they want to go? And I know these are questions I've already asked. Some want to go to East End, some want to go in the West End, some want to go specifically here or there, which is fine. There has to be a give and take on both sides. And, we have to do it in an affordable way, but in a sustainable way that's going to be long-term
Yeah.
benefit for everyone. So, and I agree, we have to spread it out. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one other thing I would say too, that just on a straight nuts and bolts level, having a home, an apartment, a residence gives people is simply an address. You want to, get a driver's license. You want to apply for a job. You want to be employed. Well, you need an address in order to do
absolutely,
any of those things, right? And so just
absolutely,
that stability helps mental health, helps and mental health helps with addictions, and all the rest of it is all intertwined. And when it comes to a sort of more immediate situation, right? The things like tent cities keep popping up here and there throughout Ottawa because the homeless as a community feel safer together. And so when
Yes.
they're able to, right? And it does end up being for them sort of a safe space to be able to set this kind of thing up. And then, you know, I'm sure the police don't want to go in and break these things up, but they end up being the ones who are sort of enforcing what I would what I would call an anti-homeless policy, just sort of in general, right? Moving along, okay, you can't be here, well, where do you go? And nobody really has that answer, right? You can't just go to a shelter, they're full. You can't just go. So I'm wondering if you have a take on that sort of immediate situation where there is an emergency right now. I just saw that Waterloo actually, their city government sanctioned a tent encampment so that it became basically a legal tent encampment that wasn't bothered by anybody, that they allowed to continue to exist, at least for the time being, until something better can be found down the road. Would you be in favor of something like that?
Um, I would be in favor in something like that. I think getting like the one in Vancouver where police had to go in and take down the tent encampment, um, should be last resort. I think communication and understanding one another is very important. I think there has to be a willingness on both sides to sit down at a table and to understand what are the needs, uh, what are the wants, and how can we achieve them. So I think communication is lacking in some regards. And I think that until such time we have an open communication and an understanding, you know, policing should be the last resort. And you're right, as a police officer, when I was a police officer, I was fortunate enough never to go to these types of situations. But I always dreaded if I was going to be called to these situations because it's not an uncomfortable it's not a comfortable or uncomfortable situation. It's just you don't want to. You feel for them. They're human beings. Some of these people, when I used to work downtown in the downtown core, I used to deal with the people that used to go to the shelters all the time. Now, some on the most time, you just pass them. Hey, how you doing? How's your day going so far? Yeah, don't forget, don't panhandle. I don't want you to get in an accident or anything. And you get to know them on a first name basis. They get to know you on a first name basis. You know, during the wintertime, I remember going into the Timmy's and paying coffee for them. Right, and it was freaking cold outside. I go, hey, have a coffee. Come over here. Let's chat. How's your day going? What are you doing for Christmas? Oh, I'm just staying at the shelter and this and that. And you get to know them on a human basis, on a personal level, right? So when they feel comfortable amongst themselves and they have tent cities, we understand that. Um, but unfortunately, there's certain areas where they can't do that. And you can't just pop up a tent city because you feel like it over here. Now, if Waterloo has done exactly what you have said and have said you can put up a tent city over here, I don't see why we would not be able to do that. But as long as there's open communication both sides and there's willingness from the opposite side in wanting to get help as well, so we can get them out of those tents and get them into proper shelters or get them into proper housing eventually and get them the help that they need if they're afflicted by drug addiction, if they're mental health or anything. At the fundamental level, we need to go to the root cause in order to get them out of that predicament. So I don't think anyone wants to be in a tent or live in tent city. I think there's always something at the root cause that causes them to be in that predicament. And I think what we forget is how can we deal with the root cause if we can in order to get them in a more comfortable place so they can move on with their life and they could be productive and they can be happy and have a smile on their face and say, hey, look, I have a roof over my head, I have a job, I have this, I have that, I have friends, and thank you. So and
Yeah.
just move on from that. So
All right. Last thing I want to talk to you about, and I have the free Zoom, so it's going to cut us off super rudely at exactly 40 minutes because I'm cheap. So
no.
this is the last thing I wanted to talk to you about. And as a police officer with a police background, the opioid crisis, right? it is worse now than it has ever been. I'm certain this is something that you saw in your time working with the police,
Yeah.
and it's moved on from just, you know, the hard drugs that have a real danger to them. Now virtually every drug that is obtained illegally has a danger to it. There's marijuana that's laced with stuff that can kill you. Like, all kinds of terrible things are happening now that weren't even maybe 3 years ago prior to the pandemic. It's
Yeah.
actually somehow gotten worse. Uh, what's your take on harm reduction in those situations? Like, how can we as a city deal with that in the most efficient and humane way?
You know, the City of Ottawa Public Health already has many services in place, right? And there's also various organizations out there, needle exchange, safe injection sites, needle and syringe program that are set in place um, throughout the city in order to make sure that when they do their drugs of choice, that they do it in a safe environment and whatnot. The problem is they don't test drugs. They don't look at what it is. The drugs are already laced with something, and it's not like they went to the superstore or the marijuana store to buy those, right?
Right.
These are drugs that are obtained illegally. So, you know, we keep money into these programs, but yet we still keep seeing overdoses. And so I ask, are these programs fundamentally truly helping? We need to get to, like in homelessness, like affordable housing, we need to get to the root cause and figure out why they're doing drugs in the first place. If we're willing to put so much money into a safe haven for them to inject themselves, well, we should also be concentrating on why are they doing this, so we can maybe get them out of drug addiction. Because if you get them out of drug addiction and they're not using drugs anymore, well, the likelihood of being in an overdose is 100% zero. It's 100%. You're not going to die from an overdose because you're not using drugs anymore. So what I say is we need to create programs that if you want to come and use these sites and facilities, you also have to go into this program that's going to help us determine or help you determine why you're doing what you're doing, and maybe you get the help that you need in order to maybe realize maybe drugs is not the way to do it, and maybe wean you off those drugs and addictions and uh, find you a better place to be in, right? Now, these drug injection sites and all these facilities that we have as well, I went and walked in various neighborhoods across Ottawa. One was in the downtown core, and I was talking to local residents. Some of them are scared when they actually live around a safe injection site or needle exchange program. They're just afraid because a lot of them are using the drugs not in the facility, but outside on the street, in between buildings, on the sidewalks, on the steps, and whatnot. So, what I ask as well is there need to be a communication between the City of Ottawa, these associations or these establishments that have these safe injection sites and whatnot, and the neighborhood, to make sure that everyone is on the same page and we can move forward and no one is scared of one another, because the community is not saying close it down. They're just saying if you want to do it, but don't scare the community, don't scare our kids either. There's a building, I believe, next to a safe injection site, and the owner can't even rent his property out, and he wants to sell the property to the City of Ottawa because there's always people doing drugs on the front porch of his property, and no one wants to rent a unit like that. So, you know, when you're trying to do something positive on one side, as long as it's not detrimental or negative on the other side, I don't see why we can't continue with this. But if you want to continue with that as well, you need to also get to the root cause. So maybe in 10, 20, 30 years, there's no need for this site anymore because there's no one using drugs anymore, especially the tainted ones, right?
Right.
So,
And ideally, we would be in a situation where we didn't need safe injection sites and we didn't need homeless organizations and shelters and all this as well, right? But I think it does come back, right? And you mentioned the root cause. I think it does come back once again to the same thing, right? Housing. But I will say at
yeah,
Operation Come Home, right? The youth that we see who walk in our doors, who are newly homeless for the first time, almost none of them are homeless because of drugs.
no,
Virtually zero. right? Maybe they have parents who just kicked them out because they caught them smoking a joint, and now they have to find a way, right?
Yeah.
But very few, right? The stereotype is somebody who finds drugs, ends up addicted to drugs, loses their
Yeah.
house, loses their job,
Yeah.
loses their wife, and ends up, and that's really not how it happens. Certainly not
No.
with our youth, right? But almost all of them use drugs because they live on the street, right? And because they're living on the street, and it is a hard life and it's not pleasant. And the one thing that's readily accessible, that's a short term escape, is drugs of one kind or another. And so that's where that leads, right? So,
Yeah.
right, the root cause of it can be alleviated like almost everything else with housing first and then all the supports that come with it after that, right? So I'm all for helping people out with rehab once they get to a safe injection site, and that I don't know if that's really where anyone's head is at when they're there. I think they just want to be safe, but without some sort of stability in terms of where you live and in terms of the supports that you have, just deciding not to do drugs anymore is a bridge way too far for somebody whose
Yeah.
only coping mechanism on the street is alcohol or drugs or whatever it
Yeah.
may be, I think, right? And
And
so,
I do agree with you. In the fundamental of everything we've just said, I think once you give someone a roof over their head and a place to be safe and a place to call home, I think everything else can fall in place. Mental health can fall in place. Drug addiction can disappear if they want to. Work and everything else, and give that person a meaning. And I think fundamentally, if anything, a roof over their head is the most important thing. And I've always said that. I've always cherished the roof I've had since I was young, whether it was a two-bedroom apartment on a couch or my house. I don't take anything for granted. And, um, if I can help out in any way, shape, or form, or if the city can do something more within their means and capacity, it's something that has to be looked at, and it's something that's going to be looked at. And we're going to have to move forward with it because 12,000 people on the list, we need to reduce that number to zero eventually. And I don't want to see it increasing either. So,
for sure. All right. Uh, I just thinking back to, so speaking of the roof over your head, you said you moved to Ottawa in 2020.
sorry, 2000.
Okay. Because
My
I was
bad.
thinking you were living in an
2000.
apartment with your siblings until two
No,
years
no.
ago. And I thought that must have made dating very awkward.
No. Sorry. No. I've been married since 2009. I have two young kids, 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, 9-year-old, and I've been in Ottawa since 2000, in the area, living in the south end of Ottawa for the last 10, 12 years. So, and I've had the privilege and honor of, as a police officer, to work, I think, in every neighborhood across Ottawa, from Osgood, Marvelville to Richmond, Dunrobin area, Fitzroy Harbor, Cumberland, you name it. I've been in every little part of the city and worked in it in one way, shape, or form, either as a traffic officer, frontline officer, or during an event. So I've seen Ottawa, and Ottawa is beautiful, and we need to keep it that way.
It
So
really is. I just realized actually while we're doing, I'm wearing a shirt that says Ottawa because I also love Ottawa.
nice.
And the Wu
But
Tang. I also love the Wu Tang.
you do have a Green Bay hat, though.
Yes, yes, that's because they're community owned and I'm a socialist.
Fair enough.
But I'm a little anti Aaron Rodgers of late, so I'm.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you for
Congratulations
having
on
me.
30 years in the police and
20
best of
years.
luck. Oh, 20 years.
20
Okay,
years.
yes.
20.
2000.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Terrific. Congratulations on that and best of luck with the campaign.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
All right. Terrific. Thanks. Well, it's going to cut us off real soon. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. It's eye opener too. So, with the questions you sent and everything, and I've been on your website. I've been on Operation Go Home and whatnot. I've heard about it before.
Well, you must have.
I didn't.
You called it Operation Go Home. So we've been around that long, right?
Operation Come Home. It used to be
Yes,
Operation Go Home, wasn't
it
it?
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
So
the day that I got that I first went to my first board meeting, right? They asked me to be on the board. I said, okay, cool. And I show up to this board meeting, and I I'm starting to think I'm in the wrong place, right? Like I'm wearing a shirt I got free in a case of beer. Like everyone, there's people sitting around this table who are wearing suits that cost more than my car. Like I'm
wow.
not, like I'm not in the right place. And they started referring to it as Operation Come Home. Well, I guess the meeting before I joined the board, they changed the name. Nobody had told me, and I was the most confused person in the world. But that was, I don't know, 16
No.
years ago or something now.
Wow. No, I've heard about it. I've never really taken a, you know, when you have your own life and you just go about your daily routine, when it comes to things like this, you don't really look into it unless it comes on the news, something happens, there's campaign happening, a gala or whatever to raise money or awareness and whatnot. And ever since I started my campaign, even I've been wanting to do this for the last 4 years. So for the last 4 years, trying to just read up on things, what's going on, what are the key issues in the city, what's working, what's not working. And, when you contacted me a few weeks ago and I started looking into the website, I said, these are all things I already knew that they were doing. And when you go to the youth shelter downtown, I don't think I've ever been in a youth shelter, but I have had the privilege to speak to not only the youth that use it, but also the people who work there, and they tell you what they do and what not. And then you build those rapport. And then if you encounter someone, hey, you should go there, talk to that person will help you, no problem, right? And it's always building a rapport with everyone. And I've been doing a lot of research on youth homelessness for
Yeah,
this,
right.
and you realize how many services there are out there. But the problem that I see is when they become 18, those services are gone, and now they have to go into the adult world, and now all of a
Right.
sudden there's a disconnect, right?
Yeah.
Because they
Yeah.
don't know who to go to. And I think that's a huge problem at any level of government and even within organizations. And I think one thing that needs to be done, I don't care if you're one organization and say, well, we're going to do it this way, you do it that way. No, I think fundamentally we're here for the individuals, for the people. And I think you can do you and you can do whatever, but there needs to be a connection